Does size really matter? This week we're talking away about weight limits in motorcycle racing. Yes, welcome along to the latest Talking Away. Greg Haynes here, and I'm just outside Barcelona. It's November already, which I can't quite believe. The weather, though, is incredible, and I'm joined by Nico Sartori, who is not just working in motorcycle racing, but he's an aerospace engineer. So, Nico, I think you're a lot smarter than me. Is that fair to say?
No, I'm not smarter. I just made another story in my life, just another way.
Well, it's quite incredible. You have that degree, of course, from Milan. How do you say it? Politecnica di Milan. Politecnico di Milan. Okay. So where are we? Just give us an idea, Nico, of where we are. We're in your home, and thank you very much for inviting me into here. But if you could just tell everyone where about we are in Catalonia, not too far from Barcelona.
Yeah, no, we are 30 kilometers from Barcelona. We are in Arenys de Munt. That is a really small town out of Barcelona, but a really nice place to be, like quiet place, and everybody knows me because I'm the only Italian one here, and I really like this place.
And just tell us, who have you worked with in motorcycle racing? Because it's quite an amazing list. We've had Jules Cluzel on the show already this series. I know you've worked with Jules Cluzel, but can you just go through some of the names? And at the moment you're working, of course, in Moto2. This year it was with Joe Roberts. Who have you worked with before? Yeah,
I started in 2006 in an Italian team with Massimo Roccoli. That was an Italian rider that's still fast. And then I moved to Provec Racing, to KRT, the team of Jonathan Rianaue, when they was still in Supersport, with Juan Lascorte, with Katsuaki Fujiwara, then Brock Parks, David Salom. Then I moved to Lorenzini. I worked with Sheridan Moraes, with Kenan Soufoglu. Then with Jules Cluzel for 3 years in MV Agusta. Then with Luca Mayas in Yamaha when we won the championship. And finally with Sandro Cortese in Superbike, and with Ana Carrasco in Kawasaki.
Wow. Yeah. Okay, so that's a lot of different championships, different sets of regulations, different riders of different heights and weights. And now the reason we are here today, of course, is because there's been a lot of discussion, Nico, over the last few weeks and months, in World Superbike in particular, where you've got a small and light rider in Alvaro Bautista winning a lot of the races, very, very close as we record this to winning the championship. And I'm sure by the time people listen to this, he probably will be world champion unless something very dramatic happens. Does he have an unfair advantage in your opinion? Because a lot of people think he does. Is that fair?
Well, no. I told you, it depends from the purpose of the regulation. He has some advantages for sure, because his ratio weight to power, or power to weight, is higher, so he has more power, more horsepower for every kilos he's moving. But he also has a disadvantage, that is in moving the bike. A light rider makes more effort to control a bike. So the lighter you are, the percentage of your weight, the lighter it is, the smaller percentage you have, the more difficult will be. And you will reach a higher level of risk in order to make the same performance. So the point is, where is the balance between the disadvantage and the advantage? And Bautista, maybe he's lighter than last year or 2 years ago, but not so much. The bike maybe is more powerful, but not so much. So I think it's just a combination of the lighter rider on the strongest bike now that makes the big difference evident. But it's not just a matter of advantage. His own ability, he knows what the advantage is having, he knows the disadvantage, and he's trying to maximize just the other one, just the advantage, trying to minimize the disadvantage.
Because they often say, don't they, that it's not always the fastest rider who wins or the fastest driver who wins, but the smartest. And it does feel, from my point of view at least, as though he's just making the most of the package he has underneath him. And I think the best package, I think, will have won the championship this year. But is it also fair to say that, you know, Jonathan Ray's had a few mistakes, a few crashes. He and Toprak crashed into each other, didn't they, at Assen? They lost points there, and Bautista got 25. Yamaha had trouble with their electronics through the season. So is it fair to say that the others can't be 100% happy with their seasons anyway, even if you forget about Bautista?
Yeah, probably there is also these things. Then if you have problems, of course, then you try to compensate with your effort, with your riding ability. And maybe they crash more also because of this. And maybe they crash because they need to take a higher risk. But to say we want to equalize the bike, it's fair and not fair. Depends what is not fair for the manufacturer, because they will be not interested in equalizing the bikes, because if not, they say, okay, they equalize me like the smaller bike, like the weakest bike. I will not put some more money in order to improve my bike, because the regulation will just cut me. It's really difficult. It depends from what's the purpose of the regulation.
Okay. Yeah. Well, we'll get into it, because Nico's prepared for us an incredible A4 piece of paper with all sorts of complicated, well, they look to me quite complicated calculations. I'm sure he'll make it sound as simple as possible. We'll hear from a few different people later in the show as well. But let's first of all get into some of this technical stuff. So, Mr. Sartori, correct me if I'm wrong, but at the moment, if we look at motorcycle racing, Moto2 World Championship, where you've been working in 2022, Italtrans team with Joe Roberts, Moto3, where you've worked before with Anna Carrasco, and then you've got World Supersport, you've done plenty of racing there, and Supersport 300, where you've raced also with Anna Carrasco as the crew chief. All of those classes have a minimum combined limit, don't they, for the rider and the bike. However, World Superbike does not have that. MotoGP does not have that, but even Formula One car racing does have a minimum combined limit, as Scott Redding often reminds us, for the driver and the car. So first of all, why is it that F1, Moto2, Moto3, Supersport and Supersport 300 have this, but the two premier classes, Superbike and MotoGP, do not? That doesn't make sense.
I don't know honestly why, because years ago, at the beginning, the regulation, like in Supersport or like in Superbike or MotoGP, so just a minimum weight of the bike, not considering the rider, all categories was like this at the beginning. Then they introduced the new kind of regulation in Supersport 600, 300 and Moto2, but Moto2 and 600 are pretty different. There is a combined weight, but the Supersport one is more complex. I don't know why they did it, or why they changed just the small categories and not the big one. In my opinion, can be a solution. It's not the perfect, because there's no perfection in the regulation. I told you, it depends from what you want to take from this regulation. But I think it's something more fair, because it equalizes riders and bike until a certain point. Now, like the Superbike and the MotoGP is done, there is no equalization, so there is no balance. Just if you are lighter, you have your advantage and your disadvantages, and if you are heavier, you have your advantage and your disadvantage. That we will speak later about what is better and worse, being heavier or lighter. And
we'll try our best as well to keep this as equal as possible and see this from everybody's point of view. So you've got the organisers who want a good show, because let's be honest, at the end of the day, you need people to be watching on the TV. You want people to come to the races, and if it's just a boring procession, nobody's going to want to watch or come. So it does need to be equalised, doesn't it, to an extent, to make it fun, to make it entertaining. But we need to remember as well, don't we, that this is a manufacturer's championship and a team's championship, as well as just a rider's championship. Exactly. So if you only really want to test the rider talent, you might as well have a one-make series.
Yeah, exactly. If you want just to see the rider ability, then you need equal bikes. So everything has to be like just Superbike and MotoGP. So there is this is the bike, and up to you, up to your genetic, if you are heavier or lighter. But of course, riders, they also want to be like equalized on the bike, because this is not a championship with a normal bike, with the same engine on all the bikes. So there are different engines, different frames, and the riders, they feel like not able to express themselves, to show what they can do, because they are in a weaker bike. But then, okay, let's try to equalize the bikes. But what about the manufacturer? The manufacturer will not like it. The same as we start to think to equalize the rider ability. For sure, there will be the strong rider not accepting this, because he say, well, I'm strong and you equalize me with the weaker one, so I will not train anymore. But it's the same story for the manufacturer. And over there is the organization. They say, okay, but I want numbers, because you all are gaining money because of visualization, not because you are fast on a bike, just because there is people looking at you. So we need to make a championship that brings more people possible, so you can have more money and we can have a better show. it's not so easy to find a solution that is good for everybody.
What does seem fair, though, is that it's better to aid those who are struggling in terms of instead of penalising those who are doing well. Because a few years ago, Kawasaki, in my opinion, quite rightfully, were quite upset because they were winning with Jonathan Rea. They were doing a better job, weren't they? They had the best rider at the time with the best motorcycle, the best team. And then we had all sorts of things to try and lower the revs. There was reverse grids. So there were changes made to the technical and the sporting regulations to try and penalise them, let's be honest. We saw the same thing with Ferrari a few years ago in Formula One. So it seems at least they're heading in the right direction to actually help those who are struggling, at the moment BMW and Honda, as opposed to penalising those at the front. But we're going to have to accept it's got to be a balance, hasn't it? Because if you're going to have different manufacturers and you want to show, it can't be exactly the same because it's still a human being on the bike, isn't it? And they're going to be slightly different heights, weights, builds.
Yes.
It's never going to be identical.
Yeah, and humans, they are really different each other. You can see a man of 50 kilos and a sportman, not a fat man, a sport of 80 kilos. There are 30 kilos of difference, and 30 kilos on a bike, it means different bike, totally different behavior. So, also it's like in basketball. In basketball, why the players are every player is really high because the basket is high, and so you have an advantage. If we want to be fair, everybody want to play basketball, so we make the net at 1 meter of high. No, it's a different sport. It depends from what we want to take from sport to sport, from regulation. Everybody want to ride on a bike. Okay, we can make a regulation for fat people also. No, it's there's a limit. There is a limit, and it's difficult to find a perfect balance. But actually, for me, it's working. I mean, Bautista is winning this year. Last year, another one won. And the bikes are almost the same horsepower. The rider is almost the same kilos. Depends from situation. There is not just every year have his own situation that makes something more evident or less evident.
In Alvaro Bautista's defence, Nico, is it also fair to say that he doesn't just have this advantage on the straight? Because a racetrack is not just a straight, is it? There's lots of corners, ups, downs, lefts, rights, change of directions, hairpins, quick corners, different variety depending on which circuit, different weather conditions, different tyres are used at different events. It's not, you could say Jonathan Rea and Toprak have an advantage in the sense that they're taller, they can shift their weight around more on the bike. So is Bautista just limiting the damage better than the others where he needs to and then capitalising more on his advantages, or does he have a really unfair advantage that they need to sort out?
No, in my opinion, it's just he's using in the right way his advantage. If you see in the riding part of in the places where you need to make a lot of corners, and in corner speed is slower usually than others, because it's more difficult for him to manage the bike. Plus he has big wings on the bikes that makes more difficult a bike on the corners. This is also another thing. Every time you have an advantage in something, then you have a disadvantage in something else. If not every bike will have wings, every rider will be smaller, as small as possible, but it's not like this. There are big riders winning. Why? They are less aerodynamic, they weigh more, so they accelerate, and it's harder to brake for them, but they have a much higher control of the bike, because just hanging out from the bike, a Loris Bath can move 1 meter, 10 kilos, and Bautista, he can move 60 centimeters, 8 kilos of weight, so the bike will turn less. The bike will wheelie more. There are a few things that makes more difficult to ride the bike. Probably, we don't know, it's difficult to analyze. Maybe now the balance is a little bit in favor of Bautista, or maybe not. Maybe it's just clever and he's sacrificing the part in the corners because he knows that I will not gain on that part, but he will take advantage of the straight.
What about the fact they're able to race these SCX really quite soft tyres now? The Pirelli tyres are very soft anyway, aren't they, Nico, compared to the Dunlops, for example, that you know from Moto2 or the Michelins and MotoGP. Is that having a big bearing on this as well? Would it be more equal if they all had harder tyres or not? What do you reckon?
Oh, no, harder tyres would be more equal to have harder tyres, just in case in every race you see that the other bikes finish the tyres, then they cannot compete at the end of the race. But we see a difference also in the beginning of the race. So I think that using harder tyres will be just a disadvantage for everybody. So it will be the same, with the same story. That's the soft tire. Now they are better for Bautista because of the electronic of the bike. He can use and also because he's gaining time in the straight. So in the straight you are not stressing the tires. The other ones need to make really aggressive change of direction, really hard brakes. This damage more the tire, can wear more the tires. So again, it's a combination. He's having an advantage because his bike is powerful, his weight is less, and so he's gaining something also on the tires. But it's just a condition now this year. So to change a championship regulation because of this, I don't know, for me it's not correct.
Yeah, I think the organisers have to be very careful, don't they, not to implement a knee-jerk reaction, which might work temporarily and then backfires in the long run. You mentioned Loris Baz there, Nico. We've got Loris on the line because he put an interesting post on social media a few weeks ago about the fact that he is a taller rider, like Leon Camier, like Peter Hickman, for example, and several others out there, Scott Redding, obviously. This was all off the back of something Scott Redding posted. He's really pushing for these minimum weight limits, and who's to say they shouldn't do it? But this is what Loris Baz said. He was basically writing on social media that being a taller rider used to have its own advantages because of your weight, the centre of gravity. You can shift the bike, throw the bike around. But he's now suggesting that it's not quite as much of an advantage as it used to be. So I've got Loris on the line and to try and just describe to us what he meant by what he said on social media. Hi, Loris.
Hey, Greg. Well, what I was trying to explain is the electronic and the aero is making the bike perfect. By having the bike perfect, you don't have to move so much on the bike, and you don't have to move your weight as much because, the bike are wheeling less and less, sliding less and less. So let's say if we turn off all the electronic and turn off all the no aero on the bike, the small rider will still have the advantage on the top speed and things. And the heavier rider can move a little bit more for the wheelie, on the brake and those things. So this is what I was trying to explain, is that now the bike became more perfect. So for sure we cannot do as much with our weight as we were doing before. One of the thing, the thing I'm more concerned is more in Superbike, the fact that in many races, the really light rider like Alvaro are able to use a softer compound even in the long race sometimes. And this is really the tricky part because there is nothing you can do. You just waste more tire than the other. But yeah, I understand also their point of view. It's like there is always for and against. For sure, what we were trying to explain with Scott is not we don't want them to add like 30 kilo on the riders. I think he's just trying to find an average. For example, even Rinaldi, for example, is much more heavy than Alvaro, and is still really small. So, but yeah, it's always hard. But I think it's always been like this in the small class. And even Rossi asked for this in MotoGP at the end. So yeah, I think it's a good thing trying to find an average weight. It's also something I was discussing with Eugene. Even for the kids, I remember racing in Spanish Championship, and the parents and team manager were just not allowing the kids to eat what they wanted at 8 or 9 years old, just to not grow up and just to be light. And it was really I remember a period riding 1 to 5 where I was eating a tomato and 2 eggs per day just to lose weight. So it's I think it's not really healthy for the young riders. And yeah, it's still like this for us. Like Scott said, we're always trying to lose weight. But at one point you have to, when you grow up, you understand that also you need to keep a little bit of healthy into this process. I've been as light that I was not able even to think right. So, but when you are younger, I think it's not really easy. So yeah, I think what I don't agree is when the light rider said, what about the strength? Honestly, now you don't need really strength. I mean, if the light rider, if this was really a problem, I don't think a guy like Alvaro will be as skinny as he had, and he can put much more muscle, for example. So I don't think the strength, it's more sport about being resistant on the race distance than really the strength itself. So this is not a point for me. So yeah, I think it's always hard to discuss about this, but I know that Dorna is doing a great job testing in its Supersport, and I'm sure it will come in Superbike at one point, and even in MotoGP, I guess, because bikes are becoming more perfect. The gaps between the riders are always it's harder to make difference on the riding now, and for sure the time you gain on the straight, it's always more and more important.
Loris, thanks very much. Stay on the line if you can. We'll come back to you in a moment. Loris Baz there, a MotoGP rider in the past, of course, World Superbike race winner when he was with Kawasaki, and a multiple podium finisher. He's riding a Bonovo BMW in 2022 and indeed in 2023. He mentioned Eugene there, of course, that's Eugene Lavati, who will actually be his team boss next year, having been a teammate this year, retiring at the end of the season. Nico Sartori, let's bring you back in at this point, and we'll go back to Loris in a second. So, Loris saying there it's actually harder than ever now for the taller, heavier riders to make a difference. Do you agree? You're the man with the degree in aerospace engineering, so you tell me.
Yeah, I agree. Loris has always been a clever guy. I agree with him that I understand his point of view. He say that essentially when you have a bike that is really aggressive, sliding wheeling a lot, then of course if you are heavier, you have an advantage because you have a bigger advantage compared to now, where the bikes are really controlled and with anti-wheelie. So at the beginning, probably he's trying to say that, but he said that at the beginning it was the difference, the advantage that our heavier rider have was enough to compensate the power. Now, with the bike coming better and better, how we say they are almost perfect, this advantage that a heavier rider has is less. So maybe it's not enough to compensate, in his opinion, to compensate the disadvantage being heavier compared to the power of your bike. Also, I agree with him that the force, the power that are, like Bautista say, that you have to consider also the force of the rider. For me, this is not the point. You don't need so much force on a bike. But you need, if you are too light, if you are lighter, then for you it is more difficult to move a heavier bike. You have to consider this, because you move the bike not with your force, but with your with your weight. So if you are lighter, it's more difficult to control a bike, to make it turn, to stop wheeling. You have electronic, you have everything, but all the electronic is always in the limit to stop wheelie, but not to lose weight, to lose speed. So the faster rider is the rider that is able to use the less electronic possible, compensating the rest with his ability. So it's not a matter of force, but a matter of controllability on the bike. Because you are heavier, I'm convinced that it's easier to ride physically a bike if you are heavier. It's not because of force, it's because of weight.
Okay. Well, there's one thing. We've just been clipping this up while you were talking. I just want to play this in. It's something Loris just said. I just want to hear this again to make sure I actually heard this correctly.
I remember racing in Spanish Championship, and the parents and team manager were just not allowing the kids to eat what they wanted at 8 or 9 years old, just to not grow up and just to be light. And it was really like, I remember a period riding 1 to 5 where I was eating a tomato and 2 eggs per day just to lose weight. So it's I think it's not really healthy for the young riders.
Okay. I mean, that seems ridiculous, Nico.
Yeah.
What did he say? Tomato and 2 eggs a day? I mean, that can't be healthy, surely.
Ridiculous, but it's not the first time that we see in sports. I mean, That's true. Yeah, look at other kind of sports like athletics, or look at the Chinese during the Olympiads. That you can see Chinese that looks like 10 years old, young people, and they are maybe 20 or 25 because they just grow in order to be the best in that sport. And if you don't want a young children to grow too much, you just need to give low quantity of food, and it will be small.
So, is that true, Loris?
Yes, I mean, I had no pressure from anyone to do it. I just decided to do myself. But I've seen so many things with kids and parents in Spain in 2006, and it was like, insane what they were saying. But also at this time, I remember I was doing the Spanish Championship and also the Catalan. And in the Catalan Championship, there was a rule, weight, bike and rider. And like Marc was so tiny at that time, Marquez, and he had to put like crazy. I think he had 18 kilo of weight on his bike, or 12 or 16, I don't remember. It was insane, and he couldn't like not ride the bike at all. So for sure, if you go like too much, it's impossible. And in the Spanish Championship, there was no rule, and then it was like super fast. And so it's like balance to find, I think, and it's not easy, for sure. So. And it's then for sure really easy to blame the one who take the decision to do it. So it needs to be made in a clever decision, maybe with some tests and thing. And I think the Supersport, testing it in Supersport at the moment is not too bad, Well,
Loris Bass, thank you very much for that. That is quite incredible with the diet. And you mentioned Marc Marquez, who went on to be reasonably successful, I think it's fair to say. Let's move on then to some of these calculations that Nico's put together for us. Okay, what have we got? Because I'm looking at this piece of paper and it looks quite complicated from my point of view, but I'm sure it's not. Talk us through it. What have you got?
No, it's not. It's just a resume to what's the difference in being heavier or lighter. I made I just put every single category that now is in the motorcycle to understand what's the difference between every category, the regulation. Essentially, if we start speaking about what's the advantage being lighter, for example, if we consider the same bike, same horsepower on the bike, if you are lighter, then your ratio power to weight, so horsepower for each kilograms of weight that you are moving, this is the advantage because your bike will accelerate more.
So this is your horsepower of your machine divided by the weights.
Exactly.
Equals your power to weight ratio.
Exactly. The weights of the combined weight, bike plus rider. So the lighter it is, there are more horsepower pushing every single kilos of that bike. Another advantage being lighter then is also in braking, of course, because you can brake stronger, you can accelerate more, you make less wheelie because you are lighter. But what is the disadvantage? The disadvantage is that the ratio between your weight, the rider weight, and the bike weight, it differs. It goes smaller. So if a bike weighs a lot and you are really light, then it's difficult for you to move that bike. So the perfect regulation, the more fair regulation would be that regulation that equalize the ratio power to weight and also the ratio of we can call it maneuverability ratio. So the effort ratio, the effort that you have to put. So the weight of the rider and the bike. There is no regulation at the moment done like this because it's difficult to apply technically. Because you have to be sure how much power you can remove or add to a bike. You have to be sure every single moment of the weight of the rider is difficult to apply.
So that would mean weighing the riders basically before every session, or at least maybe at the beginning of every race weekend.
Exactly.
Of course, they're going to fluctuate, aren't they, as the season goes on? Different diet, different weather.
Yeah,
that would be, I suppose it's possible, but quite difficult.
Yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult to control. It's difficult to guarantee the fairness that every time is applied to everybody. And if we think about men, okay, they weight like 1 kilo more, half kilos less. If we go considering women, that will be even more difficult because they can change 3 kilos from 1 week to the others. When I was with Anna, it was pretty difficult to stay behind this weight because she's a woman. We have to consider the...
So actually, Nico, just to interrupt if I can there, so that's obviously Ana Carrasco who's made headlines worldwide when she won the Supersport 300 World Championship race, first of all in Portimao in 2017, and then the world title in 2018. How did Ana cope with that then with these weights? Were you having to constantly take weights off the bike as she got a bit heavier, put it back on as she got lighter? That must be difficult to constantly be almost learning the bike again.
Yeah, we was waiting. There was a routine that we was waiting. Anna, she was waiting herself and give me the weight. every single session, every single day before and at the end of the session to see how many kilos she was losing during the session and during the days. And we had like 3 or 4, no, it was 4 different weights to put on the bike, depending from the weights of Anna in that moment. And
where do you put it? Because surely, especially on one of those smaller bikes, there can't be many places you can actually, especially with the limited time you have available on a race weekend.
Yeah, there was, we made a few different type of weight. During a test, we tested in few different places to find the place where it was better. And at the end, the better one was the one that the comment of Anna said, it's the same. I feel the same.
Okay. Yeah.
So the same with 8 kilos more, it means that it was okay.
Right. Okay.
And it was in the front of the bike from between the exhaust collectors and the engine. In a small place, we made a case of steel full of lead, melted lead, and we made one of 7 kilos, one of 8 and something, one of 10 kilos, and one of 12. In order to be always in the limit, not too much, not too low.
And is this weight always very secure, Nico, to stop it moving around while the rider's on track? Because that would influence the centre of gravity, wouldn't it? And actually, I guess, could be quite dangerous with things flying off if there's a crash.
Yeah, if you fly off, it can be really dangerous. And there is a regulation that it say that need to be fixed with a certain type of bolts, certain diameter of bolts. There is a control done by Scott Smart, by the technical director. He will allow or not. At the end, the final decision, if you can use it like this or not, is of the Scott Smart decision, a technical director decision. Usually it's pretty safe. I've never seen a weight flying away.
No, not me, actually. Yeah. Someone did say something to me the other day about, I think there was an incident in go-karting perhaps and something came off, but no, I've not ever personally seen that either.
Can be, but depends from...
But it's not something you hear about, is it really? Okay, so sorry, I interrupted you to ask about Anna Carrasco, so carry on, where were we?
Nothing. I just prepared this paper in order to show you the different style of regulation that now are in place in Supersport and in MotoGP. Actually, Superbike and MotoGP, like we said before, there is just a minimum weight of the bike. In Supersport 300 and Supersport 600, and similarly also in Moto3 and Moto2, they introduced like a window of weight. I mean, there is a combined weight, so rider plus the bike. In Moto3 and Moto2 is the only one. So you need to be not lower than this combined weight. That is, for example, 270 kilos for 17 kilos for Moto2 and 152 kilos for Moto3. So the sum, rider plus the bike, has not to be lower than this. In Supersport 300 and 600 is a little bit different, and for me is more fair, because there is a combined weight. There is a combined weight of the rider plus the bike, but there is also a minimum weight of the bike and a maximum weight of the bike. This is because of what Loris Batz was saying also. If you have a light rider and you put weight on the bike, every time you increase the weight of the bike, you make this bike more dangerous, more difficult to control. So there is a regulation that say, okay, if you are light, you put weight until a certain point, until the bike becomes too dangerous. So we stop there. In Moto2 and Moto3, there is not. In Moto2 and Moto3, if you weigh 20 kilos, because if you are a baby, they will put 50 kilos on your bike. I think that is correct, that there is a limit. And the same on the other side, there is a hard minimum weight. That means under this weight, the bike cannot go under. Because if you are heavy, then you can go as low as in Moto2 and Moto3. Now, theoretically, you can go as low as you can. So you can remove pieces from the bike, but of course it's not possible. And until a certain point, you have to stop it, because if not, teams will try to spend a lot of money in order to make pieces lighter and lighter and lighter.
So then you've got the costs going up. So that's something else which needs to be kept under control.
Exactly. So in my opinion, this regulation is not perfect, of course, because it's impossible to make it perfect, but it's the most equal. Because there is a window of weight between a rider can stay And also, you don't want a rider to be too light, because if not, you will have problem of healthy. And in my opinion, this is the best regulation, because there is a window. If you weight from 60 to 70 plus your helmet and everything, it's a healthy weight, and you know that if you are between those two weights, you are equalized to other riders.
So it gives you a bit of leeway.
Yeah.
So basically, just to recap, Nico, that was a rule in which you have a minimum combined weight for the rider and the bike, but you also have a minimum machine weight and a maximum machine weight.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Now, we have seen trouble in the past with different regulations. Let's listen now to Niall Mackenzie, who's a 3-time British Superbike champion, former 500cc podium finisher, and of course the father of Taron Mackenzie, who was the British Superbike champion in 2021. They had a lot of trouble with weight limits when Taz was on a 125 bike, and Niall fought very hard with Taz to not allow too much weight to be put on a bike of a smaller rider for the reasons you've just said, Nico. So here's what Niall Mackenzie has to say about this.
I have had experience of adding weight to bikes in the lower classes before, and there definitely gets a point where you can add too much weight, and it means that the lightest, smallest riders in the class are riding the heaviest bikes, which certainly in smaller classes can become dangerous. Not saying that would happen in the Superbike class, but I think there has to be a limit to that. I think the nature of racing is that every year one manufacturer or team or rider can find some advantages, and the nature of racing is that everyone reacts and then they fight back and find a way to counteract that or be competitive the next year. It's obviously all focused on Bautista, who has always been the same weight, and no one complained about him on a Honda being too light. It's just now that him and his team have figured out how to get the Ducati going that it seems to be a problem. So I don't think it's anyone's fault, and there are other very similar Ducatis or the same Ducatis out there with light riders on them that are not finishing second and quite often not on the podium and behind a lot of the Japanese bikes. So I think it's just the ultimate combination of a rider that's figured things out and a team that's figured how to build the best bike for the rider. So, not sure what the answer is. I will say, however, that the Ducati does start life as probably a more accomplished race bike than some of the others. But then BMW have a new bike next year that's been designed to help their World Superbike efforts, so maybe they'll get a bit closer, and maybe it's up to other manufacturers to go down a similar route. I'm sure Yamaha have got something in the pipeline, and Honda are making progress, so I think a lot of it is the natural evolution of racing. But I am no technical expert, and Mr. Scott Smart is, so I'm sure he will do the right thing, and everything will be wonderful in World Superbikes.
Thank you very much, Niall. Yeah, Nico is basically nodding and agreeing all the way through that. The general gist of what Niall's saying is that it just feels like this year, 2022, the combination of Alvaro Bautista and Ducati and that bike and those electronics and the way they're working seems to have just been better than the rest over the course of a 36 race season.
Exactly. So the problem is not just that he's having an advantage. The problem is that he's having an advantage and he has the ability to use it. Because if you take another rider, they will not complain because they complain because he's winning now. Okay, he's winning too much. I don't know. It's difficult to say because I don't know, that we can decide to make a regulation more fair, but they will agree, the riders will agree to equalize abilities of the riders, probably not. So it's not so easy point to touch. We can try to modify, we can try to make something more fair, but will be more fair for somebody and more unfair for some others.
And is it fair as well to say that at the end of the day, this is a sporting competition and they are all trying to beat each other? And at the end of the day, really, it's quite selfish, and which they have to be, but they're all thinking of themselves, aren't they, most of the time?
Exactly. If not, for the same reason, we can say you cannot participate if you are too light. If you are under 60 kilos, you cannot be a rider. I don't know. Or if you are over 80, then you cannot be a rider. Or, as I told you before, they have to make like weight category, like in boxing.
Right, so have all the smaller, lighter riders in one class.
Exactly.
But I guess it would be fair, but in reality, it's not going to happen, is it? And the show would suffer.
Exactly, will suffer because then we'll be splitted in few categories.
And different point systems and calculating the overall winner. Yeah, it makes sense in theory, but in reality, it wouldn't be a great show.
Not exactly. And also, they will not be happy. Riders will not be happy. But what Redding, for example, is asking with this complaining, the only solution is weight category. You will ride against riders of your same weight, and also we have to equalize the bike. So with the same bike, it's a different championship. He's asking for a different championship, essentially.
All right, well, we're into the last few minutes, Nico, so let's just pause for a few seconds, have a think about what you would do, and here's Nico's final decision. So, Nico, we've heard the opinions of all the different people. Scott Redding, of course, we've described what he's been saying, and we've heard from Niall, we've heard from Loris. What would you do then? You know, you've worked with a lot of these riders, a lot of these categories. Does World Superbike and does MotoGP need a minimum rider bike weight limit?
Well, if the decision was mine, I would like to. I will try at least to change the regulation similar to the one of Supersport 600 or 300, making a window. In my opinion, I'm an engineer, so I like numbers. Also, if they ask me, I have the regulation, the opinion. Yeah. In my opinion, would be nice to make a championship where the minimum weight of the bike and the maximum weight of the bike is decided in order to have riders, a window of weight of riders that is healthy. So with a rider that weighs from 62 kilos to 72 kilos, they will be equalized. It means, I think it's including almost all riders, tall riders, small riders, they can weigh between 60 and 70 kilos. It means regulation with a combined weight of 250 kilos, for example, for a superbike. Now a superbike is 168 is the limit. But I think it's possible to remove 3 kilos from that bike. So to make minimum weight of the bike, 165. Maximum weight of the bike, 175. This is 10 kilos of window where you can balance riders. So with a total weight of 250. In my opinion, this will be a regulation more equal for riders, including not everybody, of course, because it's impossible. We said a man can weight from 50 to 80. You cannot put 30 kilos on the bike. It's really dangerous. Okay, I have some other opinions about different regulation, but they are really difficult to implement, to apply. In my opinion, this is a regulation that has been tested in Supersport. It's working. And for me, it's more fair than the actual regulation of the Superbike. Not more fair for riders, not for manufacturer. Eh?
Just one more thing I would throw in there as well. At the end of the day, there's lots of things you can have figures about, whether it's the air temperature, the track temperature, the horsepower of the bike, the length of the bike, the weight of the bike, the height of the rider, the weight of the rider. What about individual rider talent as well? And, how talented and smart each guy is. And also, how can you possibly know if somebody's just having a bad day or having a really good day? I mean, you can't really, there's no gauge for that, is there?
No, there's no numbers to put on the characteristics. And also, of course, the strongest team is trying to find the strongest rider. And the same for the opposite. The strongest rider will always try to find the best bike. And this is racing. I mean, this is competition in the normal world also. To say, I want to be equal as him, it's fair, but it's not a competition anymore. I mean, if we all want to play with the same weapons, okay, let's play with the same weapons, but then we have to make a monofactory championship.
Yeah.
And manufacturer, they would like the opposite. They would like to equalize all the riders, so I can show my bike. Doesn't matter the ability of the rider. But the championships is rider plus machine. So the best combination will win. The regulation need to be as equal as it can, considering manufacturer, considering riders, but first of all, considering the organization, the visualization, the show. The show, I don't like to say because I'm an engineer, but I'm gaining money because of the show, not because I'm an engineer.
Yeah, and let's be honest, at the end of the day,
exactly.
if there is no show, or if there is a show but it's not very good,
no rider will gain.
People won't come.
Exactly. And riders will gain no money riding the bike. They will just have fun.
Less interest from the manufacturers as well.
Exactly.
So then the whole thing suffers, doesn't it? The whole show, the whole industry.
Everything is coming from the show. All the monies. I always say to my riders, you are not gaining money because you are fast on the bike. You are gaining money because there is somebody that wants to see you as is they supposed to pay looking somebody fast in the bike.
And when you say that, what do your riders say in response?
Just they don't answer. They have no answer to say.
It's a bit like being a doctor, isn't it? Being a crew chief or a chief mechanic. Because you've got to manage them technically, but also mentally, haven't you, as a person?
A lot.
Maybe even more sometimes.
Yeah. Actually, I have some books about psychology, racing psychology, because it's really difficult. It's something that is not so considered in the paddock, but it's just every year is more and more important.
I can imagine. Just before we go, Nico, obviously you've moved around a lot the last few years. We've had the pandemic in the middle and it's confusing us and we forget the years and we forget everything. Everything's blurred into one. But you've had Supersport 300, Moto2. How have you found the Moto2 experience with Joe Roberts, Italtrans, different championship, different paddock, different bikes, different tyres? What's it been like?
Yeah, well, a bike is a bike. At the end, it's always the same story. I like it. It's a double of the races. It's a long championship. I want to I don't know, in Italian we say rompere una lancia, to break a spare for Supersport and Superbike. That looks like from outside that the MotoGP, the Moto2 category is really higher level. In reality, no. In reality, in Superbike and Supersport, there is a really high level, technical level that has nothing to complain, or nothing less than what I found in Moto2, and I have no experience in MotoGP, but Moto2 is a good quality, a good level of technical part, but also Superbike, there is a lot.
It's quite amazing, though, that you say that regarding Moto2 and Supersport comparisons in particular, because so many people say, Moto2 is the most competitive world championship in the world. Are they referring then more to rider ability than they are to the technical ability? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, there is a high level of riders. So it's really difficult to win because there is a high level of riders, but the motorcycles are almost all the same. 98% of the grid is Kalex frame, and all the bikes are the same SCU, same tires. So it's a high level of riders, but technically, and for the regulation also, is higher the Supersport one. It's incredible to say, but the regulation of Supersport is more open. It allows you to make more technical modification compared to the Moto2.
But that is absolutely incredible to say when you think that Supersport essentially is a road bike that's been modified to go racing and even more dumbed down than a Superbike is, whereas Moto2, in theory, is a prototype Grand Prix racing world championship. But yeah, there's a lot of standard parts, aren't there?
Yeah, that's the theory. So just the frame.
Is that why
prototype.
then? But because of that, is that why you do have riders like Andrea Locatelli, Lorenzo Baldassarri, Nicolo Bulega, Stefano Manzi, who've come from Moto2 to Supersport in the last few years? As you said, the level is very high rider-wise in Moto2. So that's why they've made such an impression so quickly in Supersport.
Yeah, also because they come from the two bikes, Moto2 and Supersport, they are pretty similar in weight and power, because they weight almost the same, the horsepower are almost the same. So the only thing is that the frame is more similar to it's pretty hard frame, it's pretty rigid frame. So the behavior of the bike is pretty aggressive. It looks like, the first time I saw telemetry, it looks like a Superbike, it doesn't look like a 600 engine. And so probably then when they switch, they train in a high level championship, so with a lot of good riders. So if they show up, it's because they are really good. Plus, when they move to Supersport, they have the same horsepower and weight of the bike, but with less movement, less aggressiveness. So if they are used to control something, a crazy horse, when you go on a quiet horse, it's much easier to go fast.
Yeah, that makes good sense. Finally, Nico, just before we sign off, and thank you again for letting me into your home here and letting us in to have a chat. It's been really interesting, actually. Do you feel, as an engineer, the balance is right generally across the board at the moment in terms of engineering challenge, riding ability, the show for everybody watching at home, which is the most important, let's be honest. Do you think they've got it right now across the board?
Well, I told you, if it was me, I would change the regulamentation with the window, but just because probably now it's balanced, but it's difficult. It's difficult to say. Maybe there is an advantage. Maybe the balance is not 0 now; it's plus 1.5. We don't know. If you make a window, for sure, will be more fair for more riders. There will be some extra one, the super light one, that will be anyway with some advantage, maybe or maybe not, because the bike will be heavier. So honestly, if it was me, I would suggest to make the change. But if you look at the result, at the end, the championship is fun. We are having results. We are having show. In my opinion, the big show is coming from Toprak, because it's really he's a showman.
He's a showman.
It's something that Superbike was missing from years, because Jonathan Rea is really fast rider, really good rider, but he's not a showman. He's not the Valentino Rossi or the Max Biaggi, that was making like people was looking at them because of the character.
He's very professor-like, isn't he? A bit like Alain Prost was in Formula One. We were talking about this earlier today, weren't we, before we started recording? But yeah, very clinical and got the job done better than anybody else. But
really cold and flat. And so that's his strongness, because he's not affected by emotions. But if you see
that's true,
if you see a Toprak, everybody likes Toprak, So if you're not
interesting what you say, though, actually, in Jonathan's defence, because Toprak, I think, has been affected by some of the emotions this year with all that pressure earlier on in the season about going to MotoGP, and he'd never had the number one on the bike before, and it has just proven how much of a human element is involved here.
Yeah, he has. And also Kenan, he blame him. I don't remember if you saw, I don't know if you saw he made a post on Twitter or something else that he was blaming on Toprak, saying you won the championship, but if you want to win again, you have to put your head into racing. Forget about big cars, forget about flying in a big business class. Just get focused and train. Kenan mentality was really focused just on racing. Just before life is racing. And Toprak, probably it was the first year, young guy winning the championship, and he has to find the balance, the rhythm. Being a champion is not easy.
Nico, thanks so much. We'll have to do another one of these, because I really appreciate, by the way, what you've put together for us here. He's done a whole page of A4 writing. It looks so complicated from where I'm looking at it, but I'm sure in your mind it's not fractions and percentages and all sorts of things. But Nico, thanks very much. Let's see what happens then. We'll find out. Nico, thanks again to you. Grazie mille. And we will speak, I'm sure, over the next few weeks and on the run up to Christmas 2022 and then into 2023. Will we have a regulation change then, I wonder, in World Superbikes? Will we see the introduction, Scott Redding and others certainly hope so, of a minimum combined weight for riders and bikes? Nico certainly seems to agree. Let's see what happens over the next few months. Thanks very much, Nico. Bye for now.